Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this next PPN Presents session. And we're going to be talking this morning about the new office of the CFO. And I'm delighted to be joined in the conversation by Alistair Nicholas, who is the MD of Esker UK Northern Europe. I'm just going to be having a little talk about what that new role of the CFO looks like and what that might mean for you in your organisation. So first of all, good morning, Alistair. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you with us. So we just talked about the role of the CFO is changing. And in some ways, you know, it's becoming broader. Why do you think that is?
I think it's to do with the times now. The traditional CFO really has been focused on finance, financial stewardship, reporting, budgeting, and those kind of things. But what we've seen, and what certainly I'm seeing within the business, is that there's a real shift towards a much broader remit, largely driven by the pace of change and how things are external to their business changing as well, but also how much they need information quicker and how much the CFOs now are becoming a strategic partner, and that sounds very coy, but really becoming the right-hand man of the CEO, and they're becoming more of a team. I feel that finance is not really just a back office function anymore. It's really the heart of the business. It's part of the decision making, and the CFO, they've been called to have a look at things. They've got to report on ESG. They've got to report on other things, and there's much more compliance coming along the line. But what they're having to do as well is have the agility to be able to pull that in along with the financial data, look at strategies, the business goals, and really what we're seeing as somebody who provides finance solutions is that data becomes more important to the CFO, and that they're having to embrace technology, whether they want to or not. And not all CFOs do, but I don't want to upset them on a Tuesday morning. But it's to gain insights into the company-wide information that they've got, and then allow that to kind of produce their strategies going forward along with the CEO.
Yeah, so I think, you know, you're talking about CFOs really coming to the fore in a way that they haven't been before, and you know, without wanting to maybe put stereotypes forward on, as you say, on the first thing on a Tuesday morning, but it's not necessarily what you would think of if you think of somebody in finance, okay, putting themselves forward, coming to the fore in that way. And I spoke to somebody recently who said that in their organization, HR reports into finance. And just thinking about that for a moment, do you think that CFOs would typically have the right kind of skill set for that?
Ooh, I've got to be very careful what I say here, because I know a lot of CFOs and I don't want to upset them too much. But no, I mean, if you think of let's call it an old school CFO. They were very analytical, they were very strategic thinking, they were very much involved in figures and things like that. And really, that was their remit, and that's what they did. And they tended to shut themselves in their office, come up with the figures, present them at board meetings, present them at company meetings, and that was it. What's happening now, though, is that they're having to change because they are taking on other products and other processes and other functions. And I think one thing we need to be very clear of: the office of the CFO doesn't mean literally the CFO's office. It doesn't mean just the CFO. The office of the CFO is much, much more than that. It's about bringing finance together along with the CFO, but also other executives as well and other team members in one unison group of people and working together for the good of the company. And when you go back to HR, really an HR person needs to have emotional intelligence, they need to have people management, they need to have expertise and the culture. And CFOs probably didn't naturally actually have those skills, but I'll be very, very careful what I say. And they weren't involved in building teams and things like that. But what we're finding now is that the CFO has to really become an intersection between HR and the other finance functions, and they need to get information from the HR department. They need to use that. They need to understand the human side of the financial decisions, not just what's on the piece of paper or in the spreadsheet. And that's where we're finding it coming together.
Yeah, and maybe it's to do with experience as well, because of course people who have historically come up through the ranks in HR, they're gaining experience in that sector along the way, in the same way that people who work in finance would do too. So perhaps it's to some degree about having that depth of experience too, as much as it might be to about natural inclination. I mean, I think that HR, that CFOs are looking at that as a headcount cost, of course. But I know, talking to some people, that they're using AI to help them with this. Do you think there's a bit of a danger in that?
I think AI is two things. I think it's immensely exciting, but I think it's also very dangerous as well, or scary to a lot of
Mm,
people. AI is a great thing, and it's fantastic, and it's really exciting, and it can do a real lot of good in a business, and it can also help everybody in their day-to-day lives. And
mm,
you're probably using AI in your own life with things, simple AI like Alexa, etc. So it's really known. I think the problem is that businesses have to be very careful. You can't just use AI as a blunt tool to get rid of cost and to just for that process. That's especially important when it comes to headcount, because you've got to appreciate the longer term implications of doing AI within the morale, within keeping the talent, within the organization resilience that you've got, and more importantly than all of those as well, or equally important, to the customer as well. Because at the end of the day, the office of the CFO is there not just to serve the business, but it's to serve the end client customer as well. And an example from my own life.
mm.
Last week, I needed to contact a company, and I had to do it through an AI chat. And this AI chat was absolutely awful. I'm not going to mention the company, because if they're online, they'll be very embarrassed and they'll probably be writing to me and complaining. But it really was terrible. It was going around in circles. It was asking me the same question. I hadn't got the answer that it wanted. It didn't understand it. Then sent me another question, which was similar to the next. And round and round and round we went, probably for about 5 minutes. By this time, I was annoyed, I was upset, I was getting even more frustrated with this company. And after that, I went away,
Mm.
and I went back to it probably about 3 hours later. And 3 hours later was within the normal business hours. And went through the AI thing. And at the end, a human picked it up, got in touch, answered the question, and dealt with it within about 5 minutes. And I think that's how businesses have got to use AI, because they've got to use it to get rid of the manual tasks, get rid of the mundane things, the things that aren't going to keep people really engaged with their business and their job, and let them do other things, but then also use it alongside humans. It's not to
Mhm.
replace, but it's to use it alongside as well. And I think that really, from our point of view within Esker, we want the two to work together. Yeah, we'll get rid of the manual processes, but we need humans there as well. And it won't take all of the jobs. It'll change some of the jobs. But what you've got to do before you start looking at AI, you've got to think how it's going to affect both internal and external companies. And
Mm.
especially don't think it's going to solve all the problems, because it won't.
No, and I think that's so right that you mentioned there, thinking about the outcomes of what you want as well. And I think some of the ideas around making sure that you ask AI the right questions makes a big difference, obviously, to the output that you get from it. So you've got an idea of what you want to achieve right from the very beginning, and of course you can only do that with the help of humans. So you're right. I think it's more about sort of augmenting, isn't it? And I think that you do have to be very careful if you're using it in terms of trying to replace any kind of human empathy and emotional intelligence that you might have. Sort of going back to that sort of HR conversation that we had just then. So you've talked about change, and you've talked about ESG, and we've talked a little bit there about the people element too. How do you think that you would summarize this changing role of the CFO, or the office of the CFO?
I'm not going to say this is my phrase, or I've made this up, but I heard somebody say that the CFO is transitioning from being a controller to a conductor. And I think that's what sums it up, really. Because what they're doing now is they're not just overseeing finance, but they are, if you like, orchestrating the performance of the business. And they are really running everything and conducting everything together, bringing things together and making it play like an orchestra, if you like, if you want to go down that, which is very different from a decade ago. And what it means is that they've got to process the financial agility, and they've got to have the data literacy, etc. And they've got to be looking at AI, and they've got to things like that. But they've also got to work with everybody and bring people in together and make sure that they are running everything together. And I'll give you an example on how it's changing and how the responsibility is changing. I met with the CFO a couple of months ago, and they've got operations all around the world. And because of the tariff situation, basically over 4 days, they had to make some very fundamental business decisions, or potentially make them. And it involved moving a warehouse from one side of the Atlantic to the other side of the Atlantic and things like this. And it wasn't one person, it wasn't just the finance director that was doing that. It wasn't just the CEO, it was the whole team of people looking at the data they'd got, looking at how they could do it, bringing other people in. And that's what it's about. It's allowing the CFO to bring more people in, run things without silos, and actually conduct the business together.
Do you know, I love that. I've had this whole time you've been talking about that. I've had a vision in my mind of a conductor, just actually, and you're so right. Just being able to keep control of what's going, that orchestra in front of them, but also bear in mind those different elements and how they all feed in together, as somebody who was conducting that orchestra would obviously have to do. So, do you think then that it's becoming more critical that that CEOs are able to talk to, or the CFO has a responsibility for getting business critical information? You know, you just talked there about tariffs, but if you're looking at any of the geopolitical events that we have elsewhere across the world, do you see that as becoming more of the remit of the office of the CFO?
Definitely. I mean, if you talk to a CFO or talk to anybody in business, they'll say, oh, we've had a terrible time the last 5 years. We've had COVID, we've had Brexit, we've had this, we've had that. But they've always got a crisis to deal with, or they've always got some change to deal with.
Yeah.
But I think what's happening now is that people are realizing that they have to work together, and data's available more. And one of the great things, and just coming on to our solution, but it's a single platform. It's not disparate systems. It's getting the information together. So a CEO can go to the CFO and say, what if? What if this happens? Can you look at this? Can you have a look at what if we go this way? What options have we got? And it gives them chance to actually proactively take action if they need to, and try and think about the future, as well as being able to react quicker as well. So definitely there's more responsibility for the CFO. They have to get the information critical, they need the data, and they're feeding it always into the CEO and into other teams as well.
Yeah, so taking that business critical data, and I suppose with the help of automation, they've got access to that to enable them to be more proactive. But I think we've talked a little bit just now about organizations who or are able to not work in those kind of siloed ways. But I think that we still do find, certainly within the PPN network, we've recently run some research that's found that we do still find organizations do work in those silos. It's not as frequent as it used to be, but that still does happen. And what do you think the impact of that is on the growth of that organization? And what can CFOs do about that if they find themselves working in an environment where those silos are still in place?
I think in the majority of companies, silos are still in place, to a lesser or a greater extent as well. Silos really are growth inhibitors, because people look at their own areas, they're only concerned about their own area, they're not really bothered about the other side of it. And if you look at your network, you're dealing with people in the I2C world, in the S2P world, and they do their area, and that's it, and that's it. So it really does cause inefficiencies. It stops people growing. It doesn't allow them to grow. But more often than not, it can lead to duplicated effort. It could poor customer experience. It can, do things like that. And realistically, the CFO now needs to break those silos down. He needs to try and get rid of them because the data's there for him across the whole area. So from that point of view, that's where it comes that they've got to try and change the silos, get everybody working together, and have access to all the information across there as well. And then that way, the CFO can work towards a culture of cross-functional harmony, if you like, and cross-functional accountability. And it also really underpins the ability that they have to have the data across the whole area as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if you are able to have that data right the way across the whole business, and the ability to draw down the analysis from that can then feed into the outcomes that we spoke about just now. But I think that one of the problems that people have, and certainly again within talking about the PPN community, is that their systems are just working with legacy solutions, for example, and those legacy solutions sometimes can be fragmented. I mean, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could all just rip out those legacy solutions, throw them out of the window and start again from scratch? You know, we'd all be working in a very, very different environment if we were able to do that. But obviously, you know, that's tricky, takes time for organizations. But what would you say that the biggest impact or effect on a business would be if they're still operating in those fragmented legacy environments? And just I'll say one of the reasons why I'm asking that is because sometimes one of the biggest challenges that we find in helping people to work more sort of proactively, more efficiently, and sometimes that's using further digitization, is that they'll say things are fine the way that they are, and that's quite a challenge to overcome. So for those organizations, and some of whom might be listening today, what would you say that the effect is of working within an environment where you've got those sort of fragmented systems?
I think realistically, if you're using fragmented systems, you're not going to have access to all the data. You're not going to have access to everything. You're going to be relying on systems. You've got many points of failure and potential points of weakness as well. And really, you've got to have a look at modernizing the tech stack, not just as an IT concern or issue when something becomes out of support or something, but it's really strategically imperative to the company as well, which is why with our own solution, if I just may talk about that for a second, having one platform across the whole back office and then being able to choose where you start your journey in terms of the automation, you're then in control. So then you can pivot if you need to start in one area, say collecting cash is an issue, you start there, but then you have to look at supplier onboarding, you've got an issue there, so you can pivot and you can move it that way as well. And I think that's what's really important nowadays. People have got to get away from thinking, well, I've got a legacy system, it's working. I'm sure it is, but is it going to serve you for the next 5 years? Is it going to give you an advantage against your competition? Probably not. And then it's not a big bang approach. It's by taking a platform that can probably meet 90, I'd like to say 100% of your requirements, but probably 90%, and then picking out what's important to your business, focusing on that, and then moving on to the next one, and then moving on to the next one, and gaining advantages that way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and you can certainly see the advantage of being able to do that, and I suppose to some degree that kind of ring fences if you can take a piecemeal approach like that rather than that big bang, which was sort of historically the way that organisations used to go, and I think that we've all seen obviously there are some pluses to be able to do that for some organizations, but there's certainly a lot of minuses and headache that went alongside that. So if you can pivot along that system, I think you can see that would help in terms of gaining the data we talked about and the visibility.
Yeah, and I think it's about picking a solution that can give you the big bang approach if that's the way you want to go, but make sure that your business is actually set up to do that, or being able to pick a solution and do that. And then you can bring in things like the AI, you can bring in things like data lakes, you can bring in that kind of information that will give you an advantage. And it's really what works for your business, where you are on your journey. And if you think about it, this is only going through on the finance side what ERPs went through a few years ago as well, where you're not going for lots and lots of point solutions, but try and go for something that gives you a platform to build upon, and then you can continue your journey that way, and then share the information across the business as well.
We talked just now about CFOs not acting alone. You know, you're talking about the office of the CFO. But what do you see that their changing role is in relation to their team that they're working with? Is that going to have an impact on the rest of the team?
Yes, because really you're going to hopefully end up with a finance team that's technically savvy, that knows what the strategic vision of the company is and can work towards that. It's data driven. They've got their finger on the pulse of the data as well. It hopefully will allow the team to be more engaged, more involved, not doing the mundane information and the mundane tasks, but they can get in helping the CFO drive the business forward. And it pivots the finance department really into a much more strategically focused and more important part within the business. And then they can work with other departments as well to do that. So I think it will change the nature of the finance department.
And you can see working in that way, it can excuse me. So it can actually enhance somebody's career as well, can't it? You know, if you're able to look at the analysis as a result of that better data, financial information that you have, then you're able to be, as you say, a more strategic partner to the business.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine that if all you're doing is entering data into a system, or you're doing something like that, you need time to, if you suddenly get access to that data and you can analyze it and you can help to make decisions and you can influence and you can present, what we could do with that data, it's completely changing the person's role. And I think it's more fulfilling for them and more exciting, to be honest.
And a more fulfilling and exciting role is what we would all wish for ultimately. So Alistair, thanks very much for talking to us this morning. But have you got any final sort of tips or hints that you would like to share with us this morning about this role?
I think, don't think of the office of the CFO as an office. It's not. It's not one person. It's about people working together within the team, being led, if you like, as the conductor by the CFO themselves. But really, it's about starting and assess where you are as your business. What's the current state of your business? What are your core capabilities? What's working? What's not? Review the structure of the business, and then do the technology last, or very near the end. Plan first, look at where you are, work from there, see how it can help you, and then go out, benchmark against your peers, try to become the best, and then see how technology can help you. And that would be my advice.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Alistair. It's been great talking to you this morning, and thanks for sharing all of your tips and hints and your ideas and insights around the office of the CFO. And if you've got anybody watching has got any further questions, but of course, drop me a message, and we can certainly ask you, Alistair, for any other answers that you might have. So thanks very much again, Alistair, for joining us on this latest session of PPN Presents. And thanks to all you guys for watching. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.